This is IBM Museum. So I'm still doing a little bit of preparations for the PS2 Model 56 and 57 CPU benchmarking that I was going to do. I've referred to that in past videos and had the planars laid out. I just want to go through and point out a few details as I work towards that. I'm probably going to get turned around. I'll actually even go through and switch over to the industrial 7546 that I have on the bench, and because that's the same effective planars that the Model 56 and 57 run in it. If I do it out of a case, it'll certainly be this one. So I can get turned around without the worry of trampling over my microphone cord now. I've got my nice wireless microphone. And the planar that's in this system right now is the that of the 386 SLC, 20 megahertz. And I'll show the planar that has the 386 SX 20 megahertz on it, because all they do is IBM just switch the CPU on the planar to go through and effectively for an upgrade of those systems. And the BIOS on here, and I've run through and done the system information tool at the time that I had this out benched and working otherwise. But there's actually a BIOS right there in the center. It's the yellow label on top of the chip just beyond the SIM here. And that's an unknown or an unimaged FRU, although as we may have seen with the system information tool, it comes back as revision 9 of the BIOS. I'll show you where that's going to be important. We've already got a revision 9 of the BIOS that I've gone through and checked over, and we'll be showing details on this video. Now, let's switch over to the camcorder view, just so the point that I have a camera I can hold this up to. A little bit hasty of arrangement that I have tonight. I'm still kind of moving things around for a final. And this will actually be the second configuration. And I have to go through and I'll be cleaning up this this planar a little bit more. And of course I'll have to have a riser in it as well. That's what I was thinking of, maybe just in the case. I'll have to see how I come up with that. Time comes. Let me go through, get rid of the webcam view there, and that way I know I've got the whole field of view here. And so the baseline that I would do is without the CPU daughter card in there. I would just go through and I would test for that first run of the 386 SX that's on the planar and get a baseline for the system. And I'll show basically the DOS configuration that I'd work with in a moment as well. There's kind of some important things to note from the aspect of, as I mentioned, this is the first CPU daughter card that I test with it. And this actually is the 386 SLC that's underneath this kind of bronzed heat sink. IBM did a lot of their heat sinks, kind of their passive heat sinks in that color, different arrangements. But it is a 386 SLC that's underneath that. And the unit that's behind me, the 7546, it has this planar effectively here, but it has that 386 SLC CPU in place of that, and then you can see the mounting holes basically for that heatsink when in the occasion that IBM put that on board. Now, this is actually a known BIOS that's imaged, and the funny thing is this is actually the Revision 9 as well. So it's the same as the system over there. I'm familiar with this this image, and a lot of the other stuff lines up when I go through to examine that under a hex editor utility, or looking at it with debug to see a lot of the structure is the same. It looks like a lot of the dates and everything are the same. Now, it's important to note that the thing I discovered about the 8556 and 8557 versions of the Model 56 and 57 is that when you have the 386 SLC, the 386 CPU on the planar, it is not able to do that doesn't have any internal cache, so there's not any functionality to where there's a BIOS call that you can go through and the system will report if the BIOS is able to turn off CPU functions like the L1 cache. And the IBM 386 SLC CPU does have internal cache. It's got 8 KB of internal cache, so that function call is relevant to that. And if you think that the daughter card can be on the board, how does the BIOS, give that system descriptor table of what I've got behind me, this interrupt 15 function C0 hex of get configuration. That gives the system descriptor table, and down in the call there is an area that is a interrupt 15 function C8 enable disable CPU functions supported, and the system that this planar is in would have to answer that correctly. And what I found is kind of neat in a way that it actually has, it's the only system I've seen otherwise that goes through and has 2 system descriptor tables. And I can get in front of the system again just to kind of go through. And I'll probably get my keyboard in for the system in hand. I'm actually going to tuck away the planar back in anti-static wrap just to get it set aside. And get back on the screen here in the corner. And I won't obscure too much, but this is of course booted to that 7546, and it does have the driver for the serial ports. I've gone through and I've basically remarked out the stuff that was causing the system to hang. That process wasn't loading correctly, but this program is it's installed device driver, and in the purpose of benchmarking, I would go through and just basically remark all that out. So when the system powers up, it doesn't load any other program or have anything that's going to get in the way. We do also have that high mem sys that's involved, and I'll probably go through and just comment out that as well to make it so that doesn't load, so that we can have just a benchmark that doesn't have any other utilities running or anything like that. Now there is a TSR, if you go through, and that's Terminator Stay Resident program. It's a VESA driver for the video of the 8500 series model 56 and 57. And I haven't expanded the VRAM in this model. I do have, in this tube, I've got, I went through and I've ordered and got more VRAM than I can put in these systems, but I haven't done so yet. And I may get to a point where I do the, for the video testing aspect of just basically as the system runs and then go through in a VRAM expansion and install that driver just to see even differences in the video performance as well with the true driver for that and see what difference is there. Now, under debug here, I'm just going to go through and I'm going to show where these system descriptor tables are in the BIOS. And I think I can go, let's do something like that. That'll give us a good block to kind of go from. And I want to look at the area specifically for the getting down to, it's a few lines down over at the end, and it's on that line that has the 7670. There's over on the right hand side there's a 0800, and for isolating that string in particular, let's do a dump, and we're effectively in the F segment of the system, in other words the system BIOS. We're going to go 767E, and then I'm going to do a length of A, and that's 10 bytes. Okay, so we get the string that has that 0800 F826 097677 1B 0100. And what that means is basically the 0800, and that's having the least significant byte first, but that's basically the length of the string. When you do the interrupt call, string comes back and says, okay, this is the length of the bytes following this information. And I'm just grabbing it all. I'm grabbing that size in addition to the 8 bytes that the table has. And the F8 is the model. Anything that's 386SX or above, again, in IBM modeling is an F8, F8 hex for the model encoding, and that covers so many systems out there. Of course, since there's so many systems with that F8 model number for the CPU, or for that CPU or above. And then the next byte over that 26 is a submodel encoding. Now, in this instance, as far as the BIOS submodel. Now, in this instance, it is actually for, this denotes the system descriptor table that is the 386 SLC version, because 26, I can go through, let me get up a page of information. So here's the System Information Tool Recognize Machines. And that's what Major Thomas compiled just for what the System Information Tool recognizes for those machines that it's ran on, that it can give something other than basically an unknown, or it knows what that particular model is. And it does that by the table of the model number and submodel in that BIOS encoding to look up. And he's got it arranged for, you see at the start, that F8 hex being the model, and then starting from 000102 on and so forth. So down in that chart, we're going to go down to the, I have to make sure I don't obscure this, that we have Okay, let me... Yeah, that's probably to scroll right there is probably a good position because that just puts the information right on lines below my picture. So we can see over on the left, we have the going down to almost that, or effectively the bottom lines there of that F8 26 hex, and there's 2 lines of information there that because you have both the model, Model 57 and the Model 56. Now, and actually, okay, so correcting myself, 26 in that system descriptor table is for, and the system descriptor table that we're looking at, the 26 is actually for the 386SX CPU. That's what it shows there, the Model 57 SX and Model 56 SX on those lines, and has the CPU, the 80386SX, 20 megahertz, and it, over on that rightmost column, of course, shows the 5 and 3 for the available slots that system can have. So the first system descriptor table, being the lower value CPU, is actually that 26 hex. So that's basically how the system information tool references that. I'm going to go through, let's go back to the debug, because immediately following that, and so it'd be dump F000 7688 and a length of A again. So immediately following that is the system descriptor table for the returned if the CPU is the 386 SLC 20 megahertz, because it has that, again, that 0800 is the length of the data that follows in that inverse order, least significant byte first, and the F8 being the BIOS submodel again, and then it has the 25 for the BIOS submodel. And as we look in that chart, the F825, that is the 386 SLC CPU, and it shows both entries there, both lines of information for effectively the Model 57 SLC and the Model 56 SLC. And of course, on the furthermost right column, the adapter slots being 5 and 3 respectively for those models. But you know, the system goes through in that BIOS, when that call is made, it determines what CPU is on there, either the 386SX or the 386 SLC, and responds with the appropriate system descriptor table of having those 2 entries there in BIOS in different locations. Now, if we look further down the line, we'll notice that these system descriptor tables for both submodels, both BIOS submodels, of 26 and 25, are they're all the same except for one location. We get into where, if we continue reading through, after the BIOS submodel, we have that 0976, and then we've got 77 1B0100. If we go down to the BIOS submodel of 25, we've got that 09767F 1B0100. So that byte that is 77 in the 386SX entry, that first system descriptor table, is different from the byte that holds 7F for the 386 SLC system descriptor table. And that's only difference of 1 bit between the least significant bits, 4 bits of that that helps compose that 7 value or the F value. That only is a difference of 1 bit, basically. And that is the bit in the, pause for another page here. Okay, so here is that interrupt 15 function C0. I'll get myself out of the way. And going through that effective byte is the feature byte 2 that's shown on the screen. And there's a bit, the bit 3, and it says the interrupt 15 hex function C8 enable disable CPU functions supported. So it's only a matter of that being cleared for the 386SX or set for the 386 SLC CPU in whichever system descriptor table is returned. So if that call is supported, it shows that interrupt 15 function C8. This is the supported models and what the function does. And of course, this is not relevant for the aspect of the 386SX because that does not have any internal L1 cache to go through and enable or disable. As we can see at the bottom of this, the supported models, it's showing that model 56 SLC and the higher end 9500 series of the 46 SLC2 and 46 SLC3, and then of course the comparable model 57 SLC and its the 9500 series versions for it. It doesn't show the model 56 SX or the model 57 SX because those models do not support this BIOS call. It's irrelevant to the 386SX. So hopefully this has been a little bit informative of, it's the first time I've seen a system with 2 system descriptor tables because the system has to be able to react to report that information correctly, and this is the way that system does it. I just thought that was kind of cool. And going through, I know that those BIOS strings of the system descriptor table are in the same locations with the 386SX planar that I'll put in there, so I know that it goes through and it reports one system descriptor table when it doesn't have any of the CPU daughter cards attached, because in this instance, this planar in itself, it doesn't support that interrupt 15 C8 functionality. But when the daughter card is in there, all the daughter cards that can be placed in that socket have an L1 cache on that CPU of the daughter card. And it'll be interesting to see in some situations of what exactly is returned for that system descriptor table. We'll go through and test that when we do the benchmarking as well, because really it could be thought of as if it detects that it's going to be a 386 SLC or 46 SLC2 or a 46 SLC3, it's most likely going to return that second system descriptor table, and of course reporting that the L1 cache can be enabled or disabled through the C8 hex function call. But effectively in that, 25 would mean that it is a 386 SLC or above, basically in the BIOS submodel encoding. So just kind of a extra additional thing in describing that model necessarily. It doesn't mean sometimes with the system information tool that CPU is a certain level. We'll see how SIT may react to those to the system information tool being run. We ran it with the base planar here and that 386 SLC CPU that's in there. But we'll also go through and do that. And I do intend, when I go through and benchmark these, that I'll have the get over to this version, because I'll go through and it's easy for me to put that system planar in place and maybe even have the shorter riser or something else. I'll pull out that adapter. But I also have to pull that assembly off the back of the unit for the multi-serial adapter as well, because I'll have to tie into the parallel port to transfer over files. I'll probably use my 100 megabyte zip disk and just connect to the parallel port that assembly does connect to, and transfer over the files to that. Otherwise, that hard drive that doesn't really have a whole bunch of information on it, get the system information tools loaded on there, get those benchmarking programs over from my tweener system, and to get all that in the hard drive and proceed on. I may do this benchmarking. I wonder if I'm going to do it as the live stream, where I can at least have it set up by that time of this next Saturday at 10 a.m. in the morning my time, to start looking at and get back a little bit into the PS2 content to show that and run through that. I think that'll be a very informative time to go through and to do that. So if you thought that this video was informational and you enjoyed it, go ahead and click on that like button. I'm going through and I'm really liking my wireless mic that doesn't go through and tie me down with the cord. The audio on this should be good. I'll go through and test that, of course, before I upload it. So there are improvements that are coming to the channel. Hopefully, for the hasty nature of this, I didn't go through and I covered everything and was clear enough. But certainly, if you have questions, put those in the comments and I'll go through and answer those. I'll get to the point of scheduling for the live stream, maybe after this video or within the next day or so I can get up that and get people realizing what the subject, the topic is going to be for that live stream, and they can set the calendars to watch that and participate. And that's very much appreciated as well. So if you're not subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing. Pass it along to your friends as well. Get them to subscribe if they're interested in this sort of content too. I always enjoy more and more subscribers. I'm up to 880 the last time I looked. Pretty good. We're on the path to reach that 1,000 subscriber goal, even though that's not as critical now. I can do the YouTube community posts and things like that already anyway. But anyway. So that's all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.